What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Shelby GT500. Huge thanks to Ford for providing me with this awesome opportunity to review the new Shelby GT500 for you guys today. So about the 2020 GT500, it is very awesome looking and it's just so exciting that it's finally here. The GT350 has been amazing, but everyone was waiting for the 500 and now it's finally here and it looks fantastic. I especially love, the extra width you get here with the GT500. You really see that exaggerated right next to the headlights there. And although that's not a real vent there next to the headlamp, it is blocked off, but it really exaggerates and just shows you just how wide it is. And you also have this very menacing hood that is totally functional and looks fantastic both from the outside and from the driver's seat. But otherwise, coming out to the front there, you just have that little subtle GT500 there embossed in the grille. Otherwise, you just have the Shelby front lip, which is very aggressive. Now this one does not have the carbon fiber track pack. That's an $18,500 option that you can get on these, and with that you get a lot of carbon fiber components, but the main stuff is that you get a carbon fiber rear wing that's very large. You also get carbon fiber wheels instead of these normal wheels that you get here on this one, which I still actually really love. Especially, I just like how they're thinner spokes. They really show off those massive Brembo brakes. Other things that are coming onto the sides, you have these side skirts that really come out far. Another very aggressive thing. I also like the Shelby badges. There's only a few of them, but they're nice and large. I think it is the right amount. It's not too many badges, just enough, and I really like the way they did that. Otherwise, going out to the back there, it also looks awesome. So I especially love this standard spoiler. I like how it's got the cuts in it there. Looks very like Batman inspired to me. I love the way that spoiler looks. And otherwise you have these very large exhaust tips there in the lower part of the rear bumper, and that also looks very awesome and sounds fantastic. And so overall, even next to a GT350, this looks more aggressive and really nicely stands out and sets itself apart from the GT350. And I just think it looks fantastic, especially here in this twister orange color. Right, for the interior of the GT500. Well, it's very similar to most Mustangs, but there are a couple large changes and a couple small changes. So first off, sitting down in these seats, you have these Shelby specific Recaro seats, which do feel very similar to the GT350 seats, but it's been a couple of years since I've been in those, so I can't say for sure. But what I will say is that they do look very attractive. I love the white accents on them, and they're very comfortable. Now these are optional Recaros. You can still get standard, basically the same seats you get in any other GT Premium that are full leather and have milder bolstering and are not Recaro seats. And those seats are still very comfortable. I was able to sit in them briefly. They do still have the Shelby embroidered there, and with those seats you do get the heating and the cooling, and then you also, whenever you get the technology package, you also get the memory seats. But even with the technology package here in this one, we have the blind spot monitoring, the B&O Play stereo and stuff like that. Even with all those things, we still have not only just no memory seats, but no heating or cooling, and they're also manual seats, so they're not power. You do get power with the regular leather seats. Next to the steering wheel here, which is great. It's very similar to the GT350 wheel. Has just a great typical 9-3 grip for a Mustang here. Nice little 10-2 notches, all about the same as far as that goes. Nice little white stripe at the top. You do have the paddle shifters here on the back, and that is one thing that is new. Unfortunately, they feel kind of cheap. They're actually kind of loosely mounted to the wheel. I wish they were a little firmer and actually felt like metal. They look fantastic, but they don't feel as good as they look, unfortunately. But they are large and well placed, so I do like that. Other things, you have a couple of little buttons here on the steering wheel, very similar to a Shelby in its setup for the GT350, I should say. And so, but you do have this new Cobra button, and that's where the pony button would usually be, and that controls the digital gauges, which of course the GT350 does not get. And moving on to those gauges, they are fantastic. The same digital cluster you get in other Mustangs, but they do have a few things that are unique. Obviously, the startup screen is just a basic startup screen. There isn't the pony emblem that you usually see whenever you start up these with the gauges here. And also the speedometer, as you can see, goes much higher to 220 instead of the normal, like 180 or so that you see on normal Mustangs. Otherwise, it has all the same great features as other Mustangs with this cluster. And so, that means that you'll see in the middle there, the whole digital portion, and how you can change the different looks of that, depending on the drive modes. And, obviously you can switch that up. And I've gone over that in other Mustang videos. So if you're familiar with Mustangs, nothing really nothing new there, but one thing I was curious about was, is there a boost gauge? Because as far as analog gauges, we do have this little gauge pack in the middle here, but we only have an oil pressure gauge and an oil temperature gauge. I do like that there's an oil temp gauge because my Bullet does not have that, and I wish I had an oil temp gauge. Not even on the digital portion do you find that in other Mustangs now for the new ones. But so nice to have that here. But thankfully, there is a boost gauge there, and so you can set up the gauges like I have here so that you can have a boost gauge, so that's good. I'm glad they have that. Otherwise, though, you know, it still has all the same great track apps for launch control, line lock. We were doing that at the drag strip earlier, and you know, all the other great things you can measure your performance in there. And so overall, a really nice cluster still. I love the way that it's set up. I think it's really well done. Coming over to the center here, you know, like I said, this one has the B&O Play stereo, so you see that speaker up top and then the two gauges. Also, this trim looks like kind of like carbon fiber, but it's clearly fake and plastic. I do kind of wish that was still metal or something, even though we are in a lower end Shelby with this one. Now, if you go for the carbon fiber track pack, this will be all real carbon fiber, and that looks much cooler. Coming down, you have the same great 8-inch Sync 3 infotainment system, which is pretty responsive. And I will say, though, it's kind of interesting. They changed the colors and stuff here for 2020, and so it's a little different looking than my 2019, but all the same mechanics as far as how you navigate through the screen. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, so that's great. And thankfully, I believe this screen is standard in all GT500s as well, so you don't have to bump up to a larger screen like you had to do previously. So that is nice. Other things here, so you'll see the volume and tune knob, and if you are a Mustang aficionado, you might notice that the finish is slightly different. This has like a darker chrome finish than the brighter chrome that you usually see. So that applies to all of the metal trim in here. So even like the door handles have a little bit of a darker chrome finish. Even on the lower portion of the door handle, you have that as well. You also have just this like anodized metal here, or it looks like that, but it's actually, I think, plastic here for the mode selector and the exhaust and all that kind of stuff. And even it's like darker chrome around the new gear shifter, and that is the one big change here. They got rid of the actual manual handbrake, so now we have an electronic parking brake, and you have this little shifter here. Of course, there's no manual. I will say that does open up this center console area here, and so this is much larger than it is in other Mustangs, and so that's nice for larger smartphones as they continue to balloon in size. So that's great. You also still have your normal power outlet and USB jack in there. I also love you have this like leather-like material here on the sides, and you have a little white stripe again, which is great. Also, in typical Mustang fashion, everything is nice and softly padded by your knees, which I really appreciate. Also, nice soft padding here on the armrest. You open that up and you will see a USB jack, power outlet in there, same thing, and a good amount of space in that storage bin. Not massive, but for a sport vehicle like this, a nice large amount of space. There's also pockets in the doors, which don't quite fit a bottle usually, but you know, are a nice large pocket that goes pretty far back. Other practicality things, very briefly, back seat here in the you know, GT500 is the same as any other Mustang, as long as you don't get the carbon fiber track pack. And the carbon fiber track pack, it actually deletes the rear seat. So if you want that package, you're going to have to go without a back seat. And but anyway, when you do have the back seat here in the standard Shelbys, it's, you know, a good amount of space for a coupe. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I do fit. My knees are just gently resting against the seat back in my seat position here. Headroom is what's kind of tight, where my head is basically right up against the glass there. So not much more than a 5'9" person can fit back there. But if you're 5'9" or less and you need to put someone back there, you should be okay. Trunk is also the same as any other Mustang, which means it's a pretty wide, pretty long space. This one also, the one alcove there has the subwoofer because of the B&O Play upgrade. And so that is, you know, a good amount of space. I've used that trunk for, you know, 4 or 5 years now. Works great. All right, let's start up and go for a drive. So we have the Shelby key, similar to what you got on the GT350. It might actually be identical, although I do believe these buttons on the back are more of that dark chrome trim there. So I think that actually is a little bit nicer than what you normally get, because I kind of like the darker chrome. But anyway, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the end to start button, and it roars to life. All right, so starting off in the GT500, there's a great straight road, and I know all you guys are just wanting to see the reaction more than anything else, so I got it in sport mode, track mode. Here we go, GT500. Oh, okay, sport mode just wanted to slip, and then it takes off. Woo, this thing pulls. And then you get the whole, listen to that, you got this massive front post. Oh man, this thing is vicious. Oh, that was interesting though. It kind of like caught the wheel spin there. So sport mode, it still will be very restrictive with the traction control there once it detects that slip. It is a little bit cooler up here, 62 degrees, so that might have something to do with it. But anyway, GT500 here runs the 5.2 liter cross-plane crank supercharged V8 engine. It's a 2.65 liter supercharger, and so the car does 760 horsepower and 625 pound-feet of torque. And 0 to 60, by the way, is 3.3 seconds. So very, very impressive still for a car that, again, to get up to those kind of speeds, these weigh just under 4,200 pounds. It's like 4,171 here for a standard GT500, and then if you go for the track pack, that shaves about 80 pounds off, so you're right under 4,100 with those. But anyway, so yeah, quarter mile, by the way, is also a 10.7 second quarter mile time, and it'll also do 0 to 100 to 0 in 10.6 seconds. So I mean, very, very impressive, not only with the acceleration, but also with the braking. We have these massive 6-piston Brembo brakes up front, 4-piston in the rear to help slow it all down, and I think they're like 16.53-inch rotors up front, so massive, massive brake rotors. But oh man, yeah, that was awesome. And that was in fully automatic mode, by the way. But we'll go ahead and put it in manual mode here. I'm in fourth, and it's immediate with its shifts. 80 milliseconds for the shifts is what they say, and so that's in this fastest mode, which is sport mode. Track mode will smooth things out a little bit, so you actually don't get the fastest shifts in track mode. It's in sport where you're getting the fastest shifts, but even first is immediate. We'll do a little rolling start here in first, see how it goes. And now manual shifting. I mean, it is so immediate, guys. It is so, so good. This Tremec 7-speed dual clutch automatic, brand new here for the GT500. I'm a manual lover. I love, you know, every car I've owned has been a manual, but this dual clutch is fantastic. And it also hops around less. So, you know, I was a little worried it'd be like the 10-speed automatic where, you know, those in the regular Mustang GTs, they do hop around with gears, and it kind of feels like it gets a little confused sometimes. This, it'll actually, you know, if I take it out of manual mode, it's still, it will hold gears. It doesn't jump around, and even if I like stomp on it, you know, it goes 1 or 2 downshifts, but it's not jumping all over the place. And even like I was on the highway earlier, and even in 7th gear, it will, you know, hold 7th gear. It doesn't just immediately downshift. You can actually give it quarter throttle in 7th gear, do a little bit of passing, and it still is, you know, it's not going to immediately be jumping all over the place like you sometimes see with a 10-speed. And it's a really nice cruiser on the highway too. We were on the highway earlier, and you know, at about 70 miles per hour in 7th gear, you're doing about 1,800 RPM. So it nicely chills out and just fades into the background. And you know, it's a very nice cruiser as well. On these wide open straight roads, this is where you can appreciate and enjoy the acceleration. One thing I will say though is there is no supercharger whine, and you know, being a huge fan of the Hellcats and stuff like that, and even the ZL1, I really wish there was some supercharger whine. Maybe there's an aftermarket way to get that, but you know, it's a supercharged vehicle. Like, I wish they would kind of have played that up a little bit more and exaggerated that sound, or at least given us something. And so for peak power, that 760 horsepower doesn't come on until 7,300 RPMs. Red line here is 7,500 in the GT500, and it makes that peak torque number, that 625, at 5,000 RPM. So all that stuff is, you know, pretty high up there. So I mean, you still have pretty good power here in the lower RPMs, but especially in sport mode, it won't hesitate to downshift to get you up and moving nicely. But I will say this definitely puts down the power much better than what you have with Hellcats and stuff like that, which are just wheel spin galore, and also it's a little bit harsher because those just have a torque converter. With this, you have the dual clutch, so it can kind of ease into that engagement. So all GT500s also come with MagneRide as standard for the suspension setup, and so the MagneRide is really great. I have it in my Bullet, and you know, that's been something that's been in the GT350 as well for several years, and also an option on, you know, GTs and stuff. And so this, the way this is set up, there's a nice distinction, but it's not massive still. So, you know, in normal mode, I think it's a tiny bit stiffer than normal mode in my Bullet, for example, but then whenever you go up to the track modes and stuff like that, you do feel it's a little bit more bouncy and definitely firmer. But, you know, even in track mode, I don't think it's too bad. Like, you could probably still daily drive in track mode if you wanted without too much hardship, but in normal mode, you know, it does nicely filter out some of the stuff, but you do still feel so much of the road, and that's one thing that I'm really noticing, even on a smooth road like this. I mean, I'm, you know, getting lots of sensation through the wheel here, even though it is a new electronic power steering unit here. It's very direct. correct. It has a nice weight. You're even in normal mode. There's a couple different, you know, steering modes. There's comfort and then sport and normal. And in normal mode here, it's very nicely weighted, similar to, again, what you get with you know, the GT350 and stuff like that. There's also a separate dedicated button here for the exhaust, and it has 4 modes as well, just like in other Mustangs, which is fantastic. You can also set that independent. So, you know, like we're in sport mode, but we're driving around in track for the exhaust, and so that also has all the cool features that were revealed in the last year or two, where, you know, in addition to the track and the sport and normal, you also have quiet mode, which you can schedule, so you can do quiet starts, and they call it good neighbor mode, which is brilliant and comes in very handy in my Bullet whenever I leave early in the morning. So that's a really nice feature you also have here in the GT500. Other things to note, refinement is actually very good here. So, you know, this car does not have the track package on it. This is a standard car that I'm driving currently, and you might be able to hear there's a little rattle coming from the back in 6th gear whenever I get on a little bit. I don't know if that's just because this is a very early, you know, pre-production one or what, but with the track mode, I get that little bit of a vibration there. But otherwise, I mean, wind noise, this is actually a fairly windy day, and there's hardly any wind noise. Everything is very nice and refined in here. It's fairly quiet too, aside from the exhaust. This one also, you know, benefits from having the actual back seat still in here. If you go for the track pack, you do have a rear seat delete, and so that would get rid of a little bit of a barrier of sound as well. So I think this is going to be the most refined setup. Other things to mention though about the sound department here of the GT500 is that the exhaust sounds fantastic. It does have a little bit of it's a little reminiscent of the GT350, and sounds so good. I love the exhaust, and that stands alone as this car is 100% an awesome sounding vehicle. But I will say, you know, I'm missing the supercharger whine a little bit, but I'm also missing crackles and pops. So my Bullet and, you know, some of the other versions of the Mustang do have a crackle and pop type of effect, and I was expecting that here with this as well. And you know, there isn't really much. So if I go into manual mode, which by the way, you don't have to press the button for manual mode. If you just pull a paddle, it will automatically go into temporary manual mode here. But you know, if I go and let off from 3,000 RPMs, there's nothing. Whereas in my Bullet, you'd get blah, 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 blah as you're going down, which to me is fun. You know, it is kind of artificial, but I love it, and I think that adds a little bit to the experience as well, and you don't get that here in this. I'm sure that would be something you could probably tune in if you wanted, but just something worth noting, no crackles and pops here in the GT500. So other things to note here about the GT500, well, because we have a, you know, just a normal supercharged V8 engine, there isn't any turbos to wait around for or anything like that, so, I mean, you have basically perfect throttle response in my opinion. I mean, right on tip in, you move your foot very little and it immediately responds, which is great. Brakes also, as soon as you start leaning in, it's immediate with the braking, and because these brakes are so massive, it does not waste any time in slowing you down. So you can be very delicate with your inputs with your feet, and it picks up on all that very well. Visibility is another practical thing to mention here very briefly. Obviously, as far as view out of the side and the back, it's the same as any other Mustang, but up front there you have a much more exciting view with this hood that does rise up higher. So obviously the standard Mustang GT's got a lower hood for 2018, and so you kind of lost a little bit of that view, and obviously the 350 you have a little bit of a view, but here, you know, you can see that hood vent there, which is great, and the whole hood just rises up a little bit. Now it's more subdued, so you're still sitting up higher than you are on something like a Corvette ZR1 or something, so it's not obstructing your view, which I appreciate. The ZR1, it's almost like you're looking around that hood, whereas this, you can still see everything just fine. So it is still, you know, very good from a visibility standpoint. One other little follow-up though, I have been driving a little bit longer now, and one thing I'm noticing with this dual clutch, like I'm in 5th gear here, and if I just quickly tip in, you might have heard that little clunk. And there's always a little clunk that you feel. It's just a little clunky, but it's obviously once you're, you know, getting on it and stuff and manual shifting, then it's very smooth. But I've just noticed in some gears there, if you are just aggressive with just little tip-ins, you do feel a little bit of a clunk there. And even at half throttle with this dual clutch, it's immediate. So it's not like others where it only is on whenever you're going full throttle. Even at light throttle, it is still so immediate. This is one of the best dual clutches I've experienced. They knocked it out of the park with this dual clutch. I don't think anyone is going to be disappointed with the way this thing performs. And you do, okay, so there is a crackle there very briefly. So every once in a while you will get a little crackle or pop, but it's not going to do that on the overrun like, you know, like I said, you get with some of the other Mustangs. But other things here. So, you know, we're on some roads here that are, you know, just a little bit of a lower speed limit here. And obviously this vehicle has such high limits. So I'm not going to be able to sample it a whole lot here out on the road as far as handling goes. But we will be doing some track driving. We'll be doing drag strip and normal circuit track driving as well. So that's where I'll be able to get a better feel for this car's limits. But of course, it's just got such high limits. I mean, the tires, even on the standard one here, are still Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, and there are 305s in the front and 315s in the rear. So you have tons and tons of grip, and even though it's only 47 degrees outside because we're up in the mountains here, it still is just so grippy, and they're fantastic tires. Then you go up to the track, the carbon fiber track package, and then that gives you the same size tires, but they're the Michelin Pilot Cup 2s instead. And so those have you know, a lot more grip and obviously a lot better for the track, but they also have a lot less tread life. So you know, the 4S is a really great grippy tire. It's also great in the rain, and it has a good long life. Like on my Bullet, I'm at 13,000 miles, and the tires still have tons of meat on them. So I mean, that's the way to go if you're actually going to be driving this a lot, because those Cup 2s will wear down very, very quickly. But if you're looking for the ultimate grip, that is definitely the way to go. But as you saw in my original acceleration, there is no wanting of grip. This isn't like, you know, like I said, the Hellcats and things like that just spin like crazy. It puts the power down very well and has lots of grip. But one little thing here, we have a roundabout, not a great judge of handling, but you know, we can try and go a little bit around here, and it is very, very flat. So I mean, you have tons and tons of grip, and so, you know, from a weight standpoint, like I said, these are about 4171 here for the standard one. You lose about 80 pounds with the track package. That puts you right under 4100. And so as far as weight goes, you know, that's about 200 pounds or so, roughly less than a Hellcat Challenger, but it is close to 200 pounds heavier than like a Camaro ZL1 and its standard setup without the you know, 1 Elite package that those have. So this is kind of a middle ground. I will say, you know, all Mustangs, you have a little bit of a higher seating position, I feel like, than when you get in the Camaro. So I think you feel like you have a little bit of a lower center of gravity possibly in the Camaro, at least it just feels that way to me. But this still has so much grip to make up for that, that I don't find myself, you know, feeling like it feels very heavy. Again, I will have to wait till I go out on the track and I'll do some follow-up there. But out on the road here, you have so much grip, and it's so, obviously with the MagnaRide and stuff keeping everything nice and flat, you're never going to be wanting for handling. But I'm sure you weren't expecting to be complaining about handling in a vehicle like this. But in case you were wondering, no complaints. But yes, that's about all my impressions here on the road. But let's go hit the track and see how it does there. Almost 130. Oh, that's fantastic. It's like 130 for the trap consistently. My previous time was 11.44 seconds in the quarter. So we do have a 30 mile per hour headwind today that's slowing the cars down a little bit as well. But still pretty impressive time, even though 10.7 is the official time. But for someone like myself, this is only like my third time ever drag racing. You know, I think it's a pretty good time, and it just goes to show just how easy it is in the GT500 because of the dual clutch and because of the drag mode and line lock and everything. It really takes all the guesswork out of it and really makes it accessible for just about anybody. And then we hit the circuit at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and of course we are in the track package cars for this part of the drive, and man, it is very impressive on track as you would expect. But the main thing, insane brakes. I mean, my reaction there says it all. I wasn't even on camera and I was still reacting to the braking. Honestly, the braking and the shifts were the two main things that were like really, really mind-blowing to me, but mostly it was just, this car has so much grip still too. Now, obviously, I've done a few driving schools, but I'm far from a pro driver, so even on track, I didn't come close to extracting the GT500's full potential, so, you know, you can critique my laps here around the track, but I'll just say that it was just, it felt very, very impressive. Obviously, tons of grip, but on corner exit, it would still kick out if provoked. Now, obviously, that would have to be the tighter corners, because on the larger corners, they actually encouraged us to get on the power pretty early, and a lot of us were like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, like, get on the power super early, it will stick, and it did. And so that was really the very impressive thing. But even like this corner, which was a really tough, annoying, decreasing radius corner where you really got to go slow through it, the grip was very good, and it didn't feel heavy, honestly. Like, yes, you're working with a car that's heavy. It doesn't feel like it's a Miata or anything, but I mean, it does very, very well, and you know, I think it definitely handles better than Hellcats around track, just from my seat of the pants impression. But there's that braking again, which is just amazing. But you can see how fast, I mean, we're getting up to 130 there on that straightaway. Very, very, and I was kind of braking early. I could have probably even held off a little bit longer, but I mean, very, very impressive. And this is one of the corners here where, I mean, it just, you can see it's nice and flat, just very direct, and just a really fun car to take around track. And so we only had a few laps. There was like 3 hot laps plus, you know, 1 warm up and 1 cool down. So didn't get a ton of time. I would have loved more time in it, but the time that I did get, I came away very, very impressed. And yeah, so that's about all the stuff that I gleaned from it on track there. As far as the weight difference, obviously, like I said, I didn't get a chance to push the normal, you know, version of the GT500 around a track, so it was just track pack version, so I can't really compare the weight, but I didn't notice a massive difference between the track pack and the you know, being on the street with the normal GT500, but it's mostly just those brakes. I mean, that is really the headline thing here at the track that's gonna blow your mind. So yeah, it was a fantastic car to take around track.
Those shifts, it is impressive. I think that is actually, as awesome as this engine is, I think I am most impressed with this dual clutch. That's the thing that surprised me the most. Not that I had low expectations for it, but I just didn't think it was going to be as amazing as it is. And so overall, I mean, the GT500 is fantastic. You know, I think it exceeds my expectations in just about every way. Like I said, I think if I were doing it, I would have more supercharger whine, more crackles and pops out of the exhaust. That's it. Otherwise, it's basically perfect if you want the horsepower. It even got a little squirrely on me there. So once the temperatures get low, it's 47 degrees here, and these tires will let you get a little squirmy. So this vehicle, it is definitely approachable, and it is something you can easily daily drive, but it is also something that has that little bit of an edge to it. It is still a Shelby, and it still can bite back. And so that is something to keep in mind with these. It is so much fun, though. It is an amazing vehicle. They did a fantastic job on the GT500 here. So I'll list all the pricing and everything below. You know, this one, as tested here, is I think close to around $81,000. If you go for the track package, those ones can get well into the 90s. That's an $18,500 package. You know, it just comes down to if you want the extra power. I think the GT350 is still fantastic. If you want a manual, it's the only way to go as well. And those are amazing as well. But if you want the ultimate thing, I think, you know, you'll be happy to pay these prices. I think it's worth every penny if this is what you're looking for. And overall, they just did a fantastic job on it. So anyway, huge thanks to Ford for this awesome opportunity. Thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the GT500 in the comments below. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.